Discover the incredible moment a little girl's touching plea transformed a lonely CEO's life for. Marcus Hawthorne gazed out over San Francisco, the sun glinting off the bay, and for a heartbeat, he felt nothing. With his designer suit tailored to perfection and his office on the 40th floor, he was the embodiment of success. Yet, a chasm of emptiness echoed through his core. Wealth had offered him everything he had pursued: fame, power, an empire, but it had stripped him of joy, family, connection. The ghosts of childhood laughter haunted him, voices only a whisper of memories he could barely recall. Loneliness clung to him like a suffocating shroud. Against the drumming insistence of his PR manager, Marcus reluctantly agreed to volunteer at a local after-school program, focusing on community relations. As he stepped into a world filled with scattered crayons and the innocent chaos of children, a flickering notion of purpose sparked to life within him. Laughter enveloped him, a stark contrast to the sterile silence of his corner office. It was there that he first encountered Mia, an 8-year-old with wild curls and a curiosity that pierced the walls he had built around himself. "Mr. Marcus," she chirped, her eyes bright, "will you please visit my grandpa in the nursing home? He gets so lonely, and I know he'd love to meet you." Marcus's heart stumbled, a blend of unease and inexplicable warmth rising within him. The innocence in her voice pierced through the layers of his carefully constructed emotional defenses. Images of his own father flashed in his mind, the sunlight fading from his once bright eyes. Alone in a chair, reduced to a shadow of the vibrant man he had known. He inhaled sharply, grappling with an internal storm. Mia's sweet request stirred a torrent of conflicted feelings. Could he venture to that world he had avoided? Caution clawed at him, reminding him of how his colleagues dismissed personal engagement as a weakness, a diversion from their relentless climb. Success had a price he had willingly paid it by choosing ambition over connection. And yet, Mia's heartfelt plea lingered like an echo, challenging the paranoia that surrounded his heart. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." The moment passed, leaving Marcus rattling inside his own skin. He felt the weight of Mia's innocent expectation, a plea that now pressed heavily against his heart. Could he truly reconcile the two worlds he inhabited? A cold dread knotted his stomach as he envisioned stepping into the nursing home, a place bursting with lives once lived, now fading like ink on a forgotten page. To be among the elderly, the forgotten, would mean confronting the truth of his own isolation. A chill swept through the air as he lingered on the precipice of decision. Each heartbeat resonated with rising desperation. What if confronting his father's loneliness forced him to reckon with his own? The thought gripped him, tightening. Did he dare uncover the layered complexities of love, family, and obligations he had long buried? His soul screamed for connection, yet the fear of vulnerability paralyzed him. What awaited on the other side of that visit? Unanswered questions loomed, wrapping around him like a vice. Would he find forgiveness or fall deeper into the abyss of regret? The choice looming before him transcended mere duty. It was a challenge to confront the choices that had molded the essence of his existence. Marcus stood motionless in his high-rise office, his gaze now anchored on the distant horizon, struggling to quell the inner tumult stirred by Mia's request. The dreadful thought of visiting a nursing home festered in his mind like an open wound. With every tick of the clock, he realized that this was more than just a visit, it was a confrontation with a fragmented past, the pieces of which he had tried so hard to keep at bay. His fingers fidgeted with the edge of his desk, a habit left over from a childhood rocked by uncertainty. Part of him wanted to dismiss Mia's request outright, to remain cocooned in the safety of his lavish existence, shielded from the rawness of family ties and the fragility of life. But he couldn't shake the nagging sense of responsibility. This was not just about him, it was about a child's hope and a grandfather's loneliness. Could he dismiss their needs so cavalierly? After hours of internal wrestling, his resolve began to crystallize. The shifting tides within him pulled him toward a realization: allowing himself to feel was not a sign of weakness, but an act of strength. He understood that engagement with others, even if it was fraught with unease, might foster a deeper understanding of himself. Perhaps this visit could catalyze his own healing. Gripped by newfound determination, Marcus crafted a plan. He would not merely step into the nursing home as an affluent stranger, he would step forward as Marcus, a man seeking to reconcile with a past that had shaped but not defined him. As he navigated the labyrinth of unsettling feelings, memories of his father began to surface: windows of laughter, moments of warmth, and finally, the chilling silence that replaced it. Would his father even recognize him? Would he feel shame, compassion, or just the bitter echoes of long-neglected promises? Every conceivable question gnawed at him, demanding answers that he felt utterly ill-prepared to confront. The night before the visit, he meticulously prepared. He chose a simple shirt, ditching the arrogance of a tailored suit. He opted for a bouquet of flowers, intending to present them with the humility that eluded him in his corporate world. As he drove toward the nursing home, he felt the weight of uncertainty enveloping him like a fog, thick and ominous. Upon arrival, the building loomed before him, a stark contrast to the skyscrapers of his empire. The entrance exuded warmth, yet every step felt like wading through treacle. He crossed the threshold, the scent of antiseptic mingling with something more poignant, the bittersweet essence of lives lived and remembered. As he approached the reception desk, his heart raced. The receptionist smiled warmly, aware of the unspoken trembling within him. "Can I help you, sir?" she inquired, her voice a soothing balm. "I'm here to visit Mr. Alan Rhodes," he stammered, surprised at the wavering in his own voice. "Room 205, she replied, nodding encouragingly. Marcus took a deep breath and advanced down the corridor. Each step felt monumental, requiring a conscious effort to move forward. When he finally stood outside his father's room, the world seemed to fade away. He raised his hand to knock, hesitating just short of the door. What if he was too late? What if he had waited too long to attend to the ties that had always bound him? He steeled himself, pushing the door open. The sight of his father, frail and pale, sent a jolt through him that nearly buckled his knees. How had it come to this? The man who once stockpiled laughter and wisdom was now thin and trapped within the confines of silence. "Dad?" he whispered, hardly recognizing his own voice. In that moment, something shifted within Marcus, the chasm he had long ignored began to tremble. But then his father's eyes flickered open, revealing a mix of confusion and recognition. Marcus had taken his first step into vulnerability, but at that moment, he also realized the journey had only just begun. Would they find the words to bridge their years of silence, or would their meeting open deeper fissures of regret? The question loomed as he took a tentative step closer. Marcus took a moment to absorb the sight of his father. Alan Rhodes, once a commanding presence, looked diminished, swallowed by the stark white sheets and brittle hospital gown that draped his frail form. With each shallow breath, he became a living testament to time's relentless passage, one that Marcus had long preferred to ignore. Panic surged, a wave of disbelief threatening to submerge him. How could time have done this? He felt exposed, as if stripped of all his defenses. "Dad?" he repeated, louder this time, as if the volume of his voice could pierce through the layers of neglect. Alan blinked, his brow furrowed in confusion. The recognition in his eyes flickered like a dying ember, barely igniting the past they once shared. "Marcus?" His father's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Bitter pangs of guilt struck Marcus, for without realizing it, they had both allowed the years to construct an insurmountable wall between them. Had he become a stranger to the man who had once loved him? Rationalizations rose to the surface of his mind: work, ambitions, the bustling city life that had consumed him, but they felt hollow against the weight of his father's hopeful gaze. "I brought flowers," Marcus said, his voice steadier now, mimicking the calm he desperately sought for himself. He crossed the threshold into the room fully, raising the small bouquet as if presenting an offering. For a moment, Alan seemed intrigued, drawn by the simple act of a son attempting to reconnect. As he set the flowers down on the bedside table, a barrage of emotions crashed over him. The delicate blooms were a symbol of his attempt to bridge the chasm of silence, a gesture meant to convey that he was here, present, trying to make amends. Alan's frail hand stirred, reaching with a slowness that felt unbearable. "You didn't have to come," he murmured, his eyes clouded with regret. In that instant, Marcus understood the deeper meaning of those words. His father had resigned himself to a life punctuated by solitude, accepting a reality that echoed Marcus's own unconscious choices. "I know I should have," he responded, his voice carrying more weight than he intended. "I wanted to, Dad. I didn't know how." The air thickened with unspoken words, an aching silence that begged to be addressed. Marcus could feel his heart hammering in his chest, a frantic reminder that this was not just a visit, it was a reckoning. With each unsteady breath, he felt as if they were standing at the edge of a precipice, teetering on the edge of an unknown future. "I'm sorry," Alan whispered, the apology trailing off into a poignant moment of vulnerability. A tidal wave of emotions crashed through Marcus as he recalled their last meaningful conversation, years filled with excuses and neglect. He had buried himself in his career, aiming for an impervious future while allowing his father to fade into the background. "Let's talk," Marcus urged, stepping closer, nearly trembling with the weight of his own words. "Just tell me about everything." The request hung in the air, charged with hope and trepidation. Alan's gaze softened, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was an openness, the possibility of connection stretching before them. Marcus felt the grip of anxiety begin to dissipate, replaced by something surprising, a flicker of hope that perhaps this conversation could be a turning point, not just for Alan, but for himself too. He was not only a CEO standing before a frail figure, he was a son seeking to rediscover the bond he had carelessly abandoned. What lay ahead was uncertain, but at that moment, amidst the lingering shadows of regret, they stood on the precipice of revelation. He could either allow the daunting specter of the past to guide their talk or take the courageous route of honesty. Just as he opened his mouth, ready to dive deep into a sea of vulnerability, the door swung open. A nurse stepped in with a gentle but firm presence, interrupting the fragile moment. Marcus felt an acute sense of disappointment, but a new thought emerged. Sometimes, the weight of timing isn't just a matter of taking the right step, it's about embracing the pauses as well. What will it take to have that conversation? He wondered silently, bracing himself for whatever came next. As he locked eyes with his father, he realized that this was only the beginning of something profound. The urgency of understanding grew within him, a catalyst for change he could not ignore. But would the conversation they needed unfold, or would external interruptions unravel the fragile thread they just began to weave? The nurse entered with a clipboard and a warm, practiced smile that felt oddly intrusive. Marcus felt the air shift, tension dissipating but curiously leaving an aftertaste of what could have been. "Just a quick checkup, Mr. Rhodes." "Don't mind me," she said, dutifully focusing her attention on Alan, who seemed to recede into his hospital bed once more. Marcus stood back, watching the nurse's routine measuring, listening, asking questions, all while Alan answered with the same subdued energy that had characterized their entire interaction. In that moment, he felt like an observer to his own life, like the years spent climbing the corporate ladder had left him unprepared for the rawness of human connection. Did he really know anything about being present? As the nurse finished her assessment, she offered Alan a reassuring squeeze of the shoulder. "You're doing great, Mr. Rhodes. I'll be just outside if you need anything." Her exit left behind a silence more profound than before, amplifying the unresolved weight between father and son. Marcus took a deep breath. He realized now that he'd escaped into his work for so long, burying feelings beneath layers of ambition and urgency that had surged like tidal waves against the shores of his personal life. The barriers he erected to protect himself felt more like prisons now. He looked at Alan, seeking permission in his father's weary eyes. "Dad," Marcus hesitated, then pressed forward, "I need you to tell me about the real you. The things I didn't see or didn't bother to understand." Alan's gaze shifted, a flicker of hesitation passing across his features. Who I am, it's not what you think, Marcus. I'm just a shadow of the person I used to be. No, Marcus interjected, determined. You're more than that. We've wasted too much time pretending. I want to hear about the mistakes, the regrets, everything. As he spoke, the urgency to uncover his father's truths surged within him, kindling the hope that their relationship could be resurrected. Alan's brow furrowed, memories appearing to dance behind his eyes. I was a better father once, he stated flatly. But along the way, I lost myself to work, to life's burdens, to clinging to expectations. I forgot what it meant to connect. With each word, Marcus realized that the path to healing wasn't one-sided, it called for vulnerability from both of them. Here was Alan, confronting his failures, and Marcus felt an uncomfortable understanding build within him. They were mirrors reflecting each other's choices and fears. Then help me understand how you stopped connecting. It might make sense of the distance between us, Marcus pressed, his words tighter, building an internal urgency he couldn't ignore. For the first time in what felt like years, Alan looked deeply engaged, his vulnerability painting the room with an eerie power. I thought that love was enough to heal the voids, but it wasn't. Pain and resentment piled up. I shielded myself, thinking that's what being a man meant. But I was wrong. A knot in Marcus's throat swallowed his response. Alan's unmasking of truth resonated within him. He began to question the consequences of a life spent chasing status over fulfillment. How many connections had he sacrificed at the altar of ambition? In that fragile moment, the enormity of his father's admission gripped Marcus, urging him to confront his own reality. Was he similarly losing himself, wearing a mask of success while neglecting genuine relationships? Would he also become a shadow of his possible self, if he continued down this path? Before he could formulate a response, a sobering thought hit him: understanding was only the beginning, action was needed. Could he really break free from the cycle of indifference that had shaped his life? As he opened his mouth to respond, a sudden commotion outside drew his focus, a raised voice, sharp and urgent. He braced himself, recognizing that the world outside was relentless, and it threatened to pull him away from this budding revelation. How do I protect what really matters? He pondered, grappling with the pressures of life that relentlessly demanded immediate attention. He turned back to his father, the conversation hanging suspended as the noise grew, curiosity battling his desire to remain focused on the moment. Would this be another instance of distraction, or would he force himself to stay and weather the discomfort to reach deeper into the heart of their estrangement? In that tension-filled second, Marcus grasped the gravity of choices laid before him. The path to redemption they both needed beckoned, but only if he dared to pursue it with the same fierceness he applied to board meetings and contracts. The question loomed larger than the noise outside: what choices would he make to turn back the tide of regrets? Would he risk it all to restore their broken connection? He stood on the brink, both terrified and exhilarated, ready to dive deeper into the conversation that awaited beyond the limits of their past. But sustaining this momentum required a fierce commitment he had not yet acknowledged. Marcus clenched his fists, feeling the weight of his father's words linger in the sterile air of the hospital room. The tension outside was palpable, echoing the chaos he had run from for years. He faced Alan again, aware that the moment demanded more than just passive listening. It called for decisive confrontation. Are we so caught up in our failures that we can't see the potential for change? He pressed, anxiety forming sharp knots in his stomach. We've let so much time slip by. What happens when we walk out of this room? Will we just fall back into our routines, or will we actually commit to being the fathers and sons we need to be? Alan's eyes glimmered as he absorbed Marcus's passion. The air between them crackled with a mixture of fear and hope, the possibility of a rebirth flickering on the horizon. But doubt hung like a fog over their exchange. Change requires more than words, Alan confessed, vulnerability sharpening his voice. It needs action. The pain of my past won't simply vanish because we talk about it. Marcus recognized the truth in his father's statement: mere dialogue could not heal years of distance. Every day he sat at his office, reporting to an ambition that felt hollow now. Could he translate this newfound insight into a personal commitment, or would his long-held fears prevail once more? What if I told you I'm ready to make that change? He challenged, challenging himself as much as Alan. What if we start small? A lunch each week, just talking. No work, no harsh judgments, just us. The thought of taking such a risk sent a rush of exhilaration and dread coursing through him. He hadn't had a real conversation with anyone outside of work in years. Would he even know how to start? But Marcus understood that each small step could ripple outwards, altering the trajectory of their relationship. Alan regarded him through searching eyes, and for a flicker of a moment, hope illuminated the hospital room. If you truly mean that, he began cautiously, I'm willing to try. Being honest doesn't come easy, but I've started to realize that shutting down is what really hurts us. Marcus nodded, recognizing that this wasn't just about him stepping up. His father faced an equally daunting challenge in dismantling layers of history. We'll navigate this together, he soothed, grounding his words in sincerity. Take it one step at a time. We have to replace the old routine of avoidance with something constructive. The moment was no longer just about them, it became a promise, a commitment to reshaping the narrative of their relationship. Marcus could feel a flicker of possibility igniting between them, a sense of purpose he hadn't anticipated from this hospital visit, yet, beneath that promise lay a deeper tension. Could their fragile resolutions withstand the relentless pressures of life? The faint remnants of ambition that had once blinded him began to reawaken, but no longer did they clutch him in a vice. Instead, he felt an urgency to redefine success not tied to titles and bank balances, but to familial bonds that needed nurturing. Outside, the commotion surged again, a chaotic siren, urgent voices clamoring. He recognized it as the inevitable world that would soon intrude upon their softly budding connection. We can't leave this unaddressed, Marcus urged, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. Let this moment be our catalyst. Alan agreed, though the flicker of fear returned to his eyes. But what if we both fail? What if I let you down again? A knot in Marcus's throat stiffened. He turned those questions inward, battling the echoes of self-doubt that had long haunted him. What if we accept that failure is part of the journey? We can't be perfectly connected overnight, but if we promise to meet and explore the uncomfortable spaces together, we'll be further ahead than where we stood before. As they solidified their commitment, reality knocked louder as if taunting them with obstacles they couldn't ignore. Outside, the chaos pierced through an ambulance siren, sharp and relentless. Marcus, Alan interjected, thoughts visibly swirling. Are we truly prepared for what lies ahead? What if every attempt brings the risk of failure? With conviction stronger than before, Marcus replied, what if every attempt unlocks a new understanding between us? What if trying is the only way to ensure we don't become shadows of our former selves? The noise intensified, but he felt a surge of resolve rising against it. Both father and son clung to a decisive moment that hung in the air like electric tension, but the question remained, how much would they truly be willing to invest to see their willingness manifest into genuine change once they stepped beyond the hospital doors? What awaited them both on the other side could redefine everything they thought they understood about connection and sacrifice. Would they emerge renewed or resigned, clinging to the past, unable to let go of prior hurts? Each footstep Marcus took away from the hospital echoed with uncertainty. The once sterile walls faded into the backdrop of an unfurling reality outside, a world brimming with both mundane distractions and stark reminders of the past he could no longer ignore. He stepped out into a bustling street, sunlight filtering through the trees, revealing a juxtaposition between the hope he felt and the chaos around him. Cars honked, street vendors shouted their wares, and the laughter of children broke through the noise. It was in this cacophony that Marcus felt the strain of expectation weigh upon him. Then what? He pondered silently. As he adjusted his tie, the familiar sense of imposter syndrome crept back into his mind. Could he really invite vulnerability into his life after so many years of evasion? He was stepping from the threshold of his father's room into a world that still felt governed by the rigid expectations of success, but he craved relief from that very structure. A glance at his phone reminded him of the deadlines waiting at the office, a siren call to return to familiar safety. Yet, this newfound resolve echoed loudly in the crevices of his mind, challenging his age-old narrative. Was it time to shatter the glass ceiling against which he had been pressing his whole life? He navigated through the vibrant streets, considering his next steps. The promise of familial commitment flashed before him, a stark contrast to the relentless pursuit of corporate achievement. Would he prioritize breakfast meetings over quality time? Each day spent prioritizing transactions over relationships had carved a path of isolation. A weighty decision emerged. He needed to dissect what truly mattered in his life. Marcus turned into a quaint cafe. As he settled into a corner booth, he pulled his laptop out, the screen projecting demands he had placed on himself, a long list of tasks and responsibilities. Each unchecked box felt like another needle in the fabric of an ideal he could never reach. No longer satisfied with the pursuit alone, he took a deep breath and wrote out a new list: intentions, not obligations. A weekly lunch with Alan topped that list. With each stroke of the keyboard, he felt empowered. The boundaries he had placed around communication with his father began to dissolve. He would not merely invite change, he would insist on it, crafting stepping stones toward deeper connections. There was courage in this vulnerability, but it was tinged with anxiety as he understood the reality of potential setbacks. His thoughts drifted to conversations with Alan and how those initial moments might reveal unexpected resistance or require exploration of genuine feelings. Was he prepared to forgive, and more importantly, to seek forgiveness? The prospect unsettled him but also opened a new dimension of growth. While pondering these challenges, Marcus recognized the subtle shifts in his priorities. Revealing his authentic self could prove uncomfortable, but he found resolve in the realization that he would rather confront discomfort than continue navigating the emptiness of his previous life. Just as he began to formulate new strategies, a young girl at a neighboring table, perhaps 6 or 7, caught his gaze. She was in deep conversation with her mother, passionately recounting stories only a child would understand, her hands animatedly gesturing with excitement. In that moment, he understood that unfettered connection to both his father and himself was not the sterile boardroom he had allowed it to turn into, but rather a vibrant exchange filled with curiosity and honesty. The girl's innocent playfulness offered a mirror to the opportunities he had suppressed. The entire scene reminded him that growth could emerge from the most unexpected places if he was willing to nurture it. As he closed his laptop to leave, his heart raced with a renewed sense of purpose. He would not just sit with Alan, he would challenge both of them to share vulnerabilities and dreams. Stepping back into the bustling streets, the air felt charged with potential, yet lingering doubt still crept in. What would happen if those tentative efforts unraveled before they even began? Change, he whispered to himself, requires discomfort. With each step closer to his future, the tension of what lay ahead settled in his gut. Would he have the resolve to remain steadfast in his commitment to transformation? As he navigated through the crowd, the sirens of doubt threatened to drown out his newfound determination, leaving him wondering if risk would lead to renewed connections or deeper wounds. The road ahead promised either exponential growth or the echo of unresolved pasts. The choice was his alone to make. Marcus felt a pulse of anticipation as he stepped into the familiar monotony of the office. The ebb and flow of the workday hadn't changed, yet he knew he had. Each cubicle lined with faces deep in spreadsheets felt more like a relic of a bygone era, a stark reminder of where he'd come from. The lively streets, the warmth of the cafe, and the laughter that he absorbed had infused him with a desire to shift towards something more meaningful. Yet, in the face of that transformation, the weight of expectations wrapped around him like a shroud. As he entered his office, the sight of cluttered reports scattered over his desk struck a chord of resistance within him. How could he reconcile the demands of this place with the clarity he felt just hours ago? Instead of reacting as he usually would by diving into emails and phone calls, he paused. Perhaps the first step in his journey was not to do more, but to reflect more. In that moment, a surge of impatience coursed through him. He needed to act, facilitating change and overcoming stagnation wouldn't happen through passive observation. With a decisive movement, he grabbed a sticky note and wrote down 3 names: Alan, his father, and Samantha, his marketing head. For different reasons, they all mattered deeply, and he had to reach out to them. He didn't want to repeat past mistakes. This time, he aimed to carve a path for genuine interaction. Images of his father flashed through Marcus's mind, fragile, vulnerable, and longing for connection. Could he truly carve out a space for vulnerability where walls had been so rigidly built? Closing his eyes, he recalled the girl in the cafe, her unabated joy and ease of expression. What if he could harness a fraction of that playful honesty when talking to his father? He needed to confront the painful truths that had festered in silence for far too long. His resolve solidified, Marcus opened his email. As he typed a message to Alan, proposing their first lunch, he felt the stirrings of anxiety clawing at him, but it was manageable. This was the kind of discomfort he embraced, the type that led to growth rather than stagnation. After sending the email, he tossed an uncharacteristic glance towards the wall of accolades and framed achievements. They felt less like trophies signifying success and more like plaques labeling entrapment in an old self he needed to release. The longing for something more substantial hung in the air like the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Today, he murmured, surprising himself with his audacity. Today is the day I redefine my reality. Moments later, his phone alerted him to a response from Alan, proposing a time and place for lunch, a local eatery that specialized in comfort food, the kind that promised warmth and familiarity. While he typed back enthusiastically, the fleeting thought of fear returned. What if Alan felt the resistance Marcus was determined to dissolve? What if their conversations were riddled with awkward pauses instead of organic exchanges? With a quick exhale, Marcus reminded himself that readiness didn't mean perfection, it simply meant embracing the process. He needed to adapt, to let go of outdated fears. Emailing his father was the next task on his list, and with each passing moment, a wave of dread surging within him, he acknowledged that confronting this was the key to both his personal and professional liberation. That he sat back, considering his next steps while wrestling with vulnerability. How would he frame his thoughts and feelings with the man who had always been a tower of strength yet a source of pain? Perhaps honesty was the bridge he desperately needed, and just like with Alan, it was essential to risk disappointment. Before he could overthink it, he began typing, bearing thoughts he had tucked deep within his psyche. He wrote about what he had felt during their last visit, how he recognized the need for change, and how much he wanted to share this part of him that had long been buried under layers of expectation and duty. The act of writing itself became cathartic, each word pulled a little more weight off his chest. As he clicked send, a sense of trepidation enveloped him. Would be the same excitement, or would he find rejection? The thrill of anticipation mixed uneasily with the fear of inadequacy, but something in him awakened a determination not to yield to past failures. Yet, as the day ended and the office grew less vibrant, a new wave of uncertainty emerged. What if his efforts ultimately fell flat? What if they were met with silence, indifference, or resistance? Perhaps reaching out invited the very risk he'd spent so long avoiding. Standing at the doorway of his office, the shadows of doubt flickered at the edges of his resolve. Would the vulnerability he sought to forge with his father open doors to healing, or would it peel back layers better left untouched? With these questions echoing in his mind, Marcus stepped into the night, ready to confront whatever truths lay ahead. The weight of anticipation hung before him. He knew he had to reach out to the depths of himself and his relationships. Would he find strength in vulnerability, or would it reveal a fracture he was ready to face? The air crackled with possibility, and as he looked up at the night sky, the stars twinkled mischievously, hinting that his journey was just beginning. Marcus stood beneath the expansive night sky, the cool breeze carrying with it an electric energy that made his heart pound with both anxiety and excitement. His actions during the day had unraveled a mantle he didn't even realize he had worn for so long. The pulse of the city around him was a stark contrast to the turbulent thoughts swirling in his mind. What would tomorrow bring? A lunch filled with familiar camaraderie and a chance to reconnect with Alan, and perhaps he couldn't dare to hope an opportunity to reignite something with his father. The idea loomed large, imposing and thrilling, as the possibilities cascaded through him. Yet, a sick feeling danced in the pit of his stomach. What if he could not deliver that honesty? What if vulnerability, which felt like a lifeline now, morphed into a weapon that could backfire? thoughts whirled as he turned towards his apartment, its warm lights beckoning him. As he walked, he mulled over his professional life. The marketing strategies he had once executed with precision began to feel like another form of armor. Did they protect him or imprison him? It was increasingly clear that the success boosters meant to propel him were also suffocating his authenticity. Upon arriving home, he poured himself a glass of water and sank into a chair. His pulse began to slow, but his mind raced. What if his professional world collided with the personal revelations he was eager to chase? There lay a tension between defining his role as the dutiful CEO and discovering the genuine aspects of his character he had stifled. Samantha's leadership in the marketing department had been a beacon of creativity and connection, and he recognized that engaging with her might be essential not just for business, but as an exploration of the personal connections he craved. Did her vibrancy in the marketing pitches and team camaraderie stem from a clarity of self that he was only beginning to fathom? Pulling out his laptop, he opened a blank document. A sudden realization hit him. He had spent so long structuring everything, outlining the strategic pathways toward goals without considering the underlying stories that motivated them. What if he could infuse authenticity into these outlines? What if he could allow himself to talk with her, deeply, about business and life alike? He began drafting an email to Samantha, something light-hearted yet sincere that hinted at redefining their working relationship into one rooted in connection. Perhaps it would establish a foundation not just for effective marketing, but for finding the heart of what he wanted to do, both professionally and personally. As the pixels appeared on the screen, forming words that cried out for authenticity, he hesitated. This was not merely a professional communication, this was a risk. It was inviting someone into his newly developed vulnerable self, a self that was still fragile and testing its limits. His pulse quickened. What if she rejected his approach? What if she expected only the data-driven Marcus, the one who never wore his heart on his sleeve? But what if her response opened doors to new insights, to reconceptualizing everything: business strategies, personal values, even familial relationships? In a moment of rebellious conviction, he hit send. A rush of adrenaline followed, paired with a weight of uncertainty that settled uncomfortably in his chest. As he reclined in his chair, he couldn't help but smile. The act felt electrifying and terrifying all at once. This was not merely an email, but an invitation to shift paradigms, a chance to nourish not just outcomes but relationships built on truth. Marcus settled into the realization that sometimes the most transformative paths began with a leap of faith, even in the face of potential heartbreak. These changes were not solely about business, they were about redefining who he was meant to be. Then, as if cued from an unseen hand, his phone buzzed. It was a notification from Alan, who proposed shifting their lunch to an earlier time. The invitation set off a cascade of emotions within him. Would this be a stepping stone towards forging a deeper connection with both Alan and his father? Or was it merely another ripple on the surface of a turbulent sea he was attempting to navigate? He stared at the screen, heart racing, as he weighed his next steps. The time had come to face not just his fears, but the people in his life who could either validate or challenge the new chapter he was slowly beginning to write. Was he ready to navigate these uncharted waters, with perspective shifting and courage gradually solidifying? Marcus took a deep breath. The stakes were undeniably high, but perhaps, just perhaps, the uncertainty was a price worth paying for a chance at genuine connection. Stepping fully into the unknown might be the only way to find himself. What awaited him in the vulnerability of those encounters? What truths would emerge, shared at the table with people who mattered? The answers loomed just beyond the horizon, enticing him towards the edge of transformation. Marcus awoke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through his blinds, the warmth enveloping him with a gentle insistence. The day ahead felt monumental, laden with the weight of possibilities that stretched far beyond the confines of his professional agenda. As he got ready, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. The man staring back seemed both familiar and foreign, an embodiment of a struggle balancing ambition and authenticity. His phone buzzed again, a reminder of his lunch with Alan just a couple of hours away. While the anticipation started stirring a mix of adrenaline and trepidation in him, a deeper thought clawed at the edges of his mind. Would this lunch merely be a transaction, or could it evolve into a turning point in his relational landscape? the coffee brewed in the background, the bitter aroma enveloping the kitchen, grounding him in the present. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that these interactions could redefine not only his connection with Alan but could illuminate truths about his own identity. He leaned against the counter, allowing the thoughts to flow. Vulnerability didn't just entangle the personal sphere but echoed through the corridors of business, transforming how leaders like him related to their teams and stakeholders. After a quick shower, he dressed thoughtfully, shaking off the constraints of corporate armor that had cloaked him for too long. He chose a simple shirt paired with tailored pants, a blend of professional polish and personal comfort. Today was about authenticity. About seeing the man before titles and status, the man he was ready to discover beyond the algorithm of success. As Marcus made his way to the meeting spot, his thoughts drifted to Samantha's creative energy and how it seemed to bloom from a place of confidence and genuine connection. In contrast, he had often operated from a hum of obligation, rehearsing responses and navigating roles. Would it be possible to present himself as someone who felt deeply, not only about family issues but about the direction of the company itself? The clatter of city life surrounded him, yet his mind floated within the framework of introspection. What if he walked into that restaurant, faced Alan armed not just with a desire for connection, but with a commitment to honesty? The prospect electrified him. What truths could emerge not just from Alan's mouth, but through Marcus's own revelations? When he stepped into the bustling eatery, the words danced at the tip of his tongue as he spotted Alan. His old friend was already seated at a table, engrossed in his phone. Marcus felt a familiar pang of nostalgia as he remembered all their shared moments, the laughter seasoned by years of trust. This was a man who had seen him succeed and falter, a grounding presence even amidst the noise of life. As Alan looked up and greeted him with a bright smile, Marcus noticed a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, as if Alan could sense the shifts within him. "Hey, man. You okay?" Alan asked, his tone infused with genuine concern. Marcus took a steadying breath. "Yeah, I am actually. I've been doing some thinking." Sitting down, Marcus felt the stakes elevate. Could this lunch pave the way for genuine dialogue about feelings, expectations, and ultimately, reconciliation? The conversation flowed effortlessly at first, about work, life, and the shared places they used to visit. Yet, beneath the surface, fresh questions simmered. When the chatter lulled, Marcus felt the moment he had been gearing up for. He leaned slightly closer. "I've been meaning to talk about my relationship with my father. I think I need to address it more openly, and not just professionally." Alan's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "That's big, dude. What do you mean?" The opening was perfect. The realization struck Marcus. This was the moment. It wasn't merely about work anymore, it was a step toward ownership of his narrative. With every word, he explored the depths of his pain and the sense of disconnect he had felt for years. Each admission felt like shedding another layer of protective skin, revealing a persona more raw yet resilient. As Alan listened and nodded, sharing his perspective, something began to shift. The air felt lighter, colors sharper, every exchange a dialogue against the backdrop of genuine understanding, but even within that propitious exchange, a tremor of anxiety nagged at him. Was this just the beginning of vulnerability or the start of turbulent conflicts he wasn't yet prepared to face? Just as Marcus was contemplating the richness of their discussion, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Samantha, acknowledging his email, promising to meet soon. The anticipation mixed intriguingly with an undercurrent of fear. Could he face another round of exposure, embrace yet more unknown truths? The tension within him tightened, a promise of connection coupled with the reality of potential truths unfolding. How would he continue this intricate weaving of personal and professional development? How deep would the next exchange take him, especially with someone like Samantha, who embodied the vibrancy he longed to embody himself? With heart racing and future questions swirling, Marcus pondered what awaited him. The time had come to step beyond the fragile line he had drawn, a brave dive into deeper waters. Would he emerge transformed? This journey was now undeniably intertwined with more than just him. Marcus Hawthorne entered the familiar office space with a sharp clarity that had evaded him for so long. The chaos of the city outside melded into a vibrant space within the den of his rebirthed ambitions, no longer only defined by corporate dominance, but by emotional courage and deeper connectivity with those around him. He had engaged in a transformative lunch with Alan, a moment that would echo within his future decisions. The warmth of that interaction surged within him, infusing his every step with purpose. This was not just a day any other day, it was the day he would solidify his commitment to redefining success not as titles or profits, but as relationships and personal truths. In each meeting, Marcus now took the time to connect with his colleagues, challenging the very foundations of his leadership principles. The strategy-filled PowerPoint presentations transformed into discussions that prioritized fundamental human experiences, what drives them, their passions, and even their fears. In a tangible shift, he introduced weekly check-ins with his team. These meetings became avenues for open sharing, allowing vulnerabilities to punctuate corporate strategies with authentic stories. The breakthroughs were tangible, engagement rose, creativity flourished, and everyone was suddenly part of something more meaningful. But it was with Samantha that true beauty emerged. As they collaborated on fresh marketing strategies, Marcus began to share more than just data. He shared pieces of his journey. He talked about his father, the haunting regrets, and the fullness of his realization that wealth meant nothing without human connection. Each revelation led them closer conversations filled with laughter and skepticism about corporate expectations. They explored the deeper implications of connecting on an emotional level and how their campaigns could resonate on this same frequency. Days turned into weeks, and as he stepped back into the world of the nursing home, this time it was different. There was a sense of familiarity, warmth, and acceptance waiting for him. Alan sat in his chair, eyes lightening upon Marcus's arrival. "You came back," he said, a fragility settling within his voice. "Of course, Dad. I'm here to really connect this time," Marcus replied, his voice steady, laced with the confidence of someone who had achieved real transformation. As they spoke, understanding began to unfurl their previously muddled conversations into clarity. Both men shared stories of hardship and the burdens of choices left unexamined. In this crucible of shared vulnerability, they began to forge a new bond. "Your lunch with me changed you, didn't it?" Alan asked one day as Marcus leaned in to hear more about his father's past. "Yes," he affirmed without hesitation. "It made me realize that some successes are meant to be shared, not hoarded. I've been working to rewrite my definition of success, one where our dreams and aspirations align but are framed through the lens of our shared humanity. I want to carry this forward, not only in business but in our family." As he spoke those words, Marcus felt a release. He had achieved a personal rebirth. No longer aloofly ambitious, he had built a bridge, connecting his past with a future rich in relationships and honesty. The couple of lunches they shared became a routine, not merely beholden to obligation but blossoming into the heart of their healing. It was only a month later that Marcus received an award recognizing him as a leader who exemplified transformative behaviors in his company. As he stood to accept the accolade, the applause echoed not just for the achievements etched on paper, but for the depth of connection he fostered among diverse voices. When he spoke into the microphone, he referenced his father's influence, calling out the importance of family connections, which ultimately sustained individual ambition. Every clapping hand represented a shared narrative, a recent meeting where colleagues reflected raw, emotional truths into their work. Personal risks taken led to authentic storytelling that resonated across their consumer audience. Each smile he received reflected a shared understanding. They, too, had crossed thresholds into authenticity, creating pathways into deeper connections. As Marcus walked off stage, his heart full, he recognized that he had conquered more than just professional goals. He had liberated himself from the chains of isolation he had carried for years. The realization rang clear: the power of connection altered the trajectory of personal existence and corporate culture alike. No longer merely a CEO, he became a conscious leader driven by authenticity, achieving solid confidence in both realms. In every area that had once seemed isolated, he established his footing, grounded in honesty and competency. With a renewed sense of reassurance linked to fatherhood and humanity, Marcus knew the road ahead brimmed with endless possibilities. He had forged transformative pathways that led him home. Now it's your time to act. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.